The Martian by H.G. Wells follows a pretty traceable plot. In the exposition, the aliens are leaving the Martian planet, and this is discussed by the narrator, who is going back and telling all this. He's already lived all the events whenever he's introducing the book. And so the exposition is him telling about the aliens leaving Mars to come to Earth and nobody being concerned. The rising action is when the aliens are starting to invade. They get to Earth. It's not really a big deal for a little while. It's still part of the exposition. And then they start to kill people, and that leads to the rising action. And that carries out throughout the novel for a long time. It's a lot of battles between the aliens and the military and the narrator, and just a lot of seeing the Martians and the humans interact. The climax is whenever the narrator and the curator are stuck in the building, and the narrator sees the aliens picking up people and like using them to transfuse their blood into themselves. And he barely escapes that ordeal. The fallen action is whenever he gets to the River Thames, he sees all the weeds growing around, all the alien weeds and stuff. And the end is whenever he is told that also the fallen action is whenever he is told that the aliens have been killed by the virus. And then the very end, the resolution, is after he has a nervous breakdown, is taken care of by a family and stuff, and he eventually gets better, goes back to London, gets with his wife, and so it's not happily ever after, but it ends up being pretty good for the narrator. There are two characters that are very worth analyzing. The first is the narrator of the book. He doesn't really have a name or much revealed about him besides where he lives and the fact that he's married and he's into astronomy. He has anxiety, even though it's not really discussed in the book, but a lot of his demeanor and what he says leads to people thinking that. For example, whenever his house, the town this house is in, is being attacked by the aliens and everybody's dying, and he gets upstairs, he just watches through the window, and he doesn't really seem concerned, and he mentions that sometimes he feels a very strange disconnect from events that are going on. He feels like he's sort of out of his head, like from his body, and that's a very common trait of anxiety known as dissociation. And also stuff like that happens throughout the rest of the novel, including his nervous breakdown at the end. He has a few flaws, such as being too brash. He leads his wife, and he's too curious sometimes, because he goes back to town despite knowing how close it is to the alien invasion. However, he has more good traits than bad traits, such as being very smart and innovative. For example, whenever the aliens are attacking near the Thames and they have the heat ray, he suggests getting under the water to avoid being heated. Another character worth discussing is Ogilvy. He dies in the beginning of the novel. However, there's a lot to learn from him. We know that he's a scientist and that he's one of the few people who is actually looking at the Martian flares that were really the rocket ship coming towards Earth. And he doesn't believe that the Martians are going to be invading. He doesn't believe that Martians exist. And this is like his tragic downfall, because even though he is a scientific researcher, an astronomer, he is ultimately killed by the Martians that he didn't even believe in. So it's ironic for that to have happened. This book should definitely be considered a classic because it is very good for people to be able to read and relate to. It was really one of the first alien novels on this sort of scale, and people were terrified of it. For example, whenever the radio adaptation came on, and people really thought that aliens were invading, so it's well written. And it also tells a story that could really happen anywhere, not with aliens exactly, but with anything. Because when the aliens are about to attack, when people are in danger, people still don't really care. And that still carries out to today. Like, people can be told that something horrible is happening, like, in another part of the world, or even, like, right in the next state or something, and they just carry on with their business. Like, they don't really care. And so it's good for people to read because it's nice to see that bridge between when this was written and now, and see how they are able to relate. So it definitely should be considered a classic because of its literary worth, which it has a lot of, because of its ability to connect modern day with the old days. This story has really high literary worth because it is one of the first books concerning alien invasions on this sort of scale, and it also has a big historical impact, like the time that it was broadcast on a radio station and people were freaking out and stuff. And it also tells a lot about how people thought back when the story was written, and how they didn't really believe that, bad stuff could happen even as it was happening around them. And that still translates to today because people still think the same thing. And so whenever they read this book, they kind of realize, hey, maybe I should be paying more attention to, like, what's happening around me instead of just ignoring everything that's trying to tell me that something bad's going to happen or that I should pay more attention. And so it's a very important book for everybody to read. That's why it's considered a classic.